Hello and welcome to Different Perspectives. I'm Paul Ndiho in Washington. We are live across all our social media platforms, and today the narrative of Africa Cup of Nations or AFCON 2025 shifted from opening jitters to clinical dominance. The big story is Senegal. The Lions of Tangara didn't just beat Botswana 3-0, they dismantled them. Bayern Munich striker Nicolas Jackson, currently on loan from Chelsea, proved why he is the most talked about forward in Africa right now, netting a brace that showcased both his physical presence and his elite movement. Senegal now sits atop Group D on goal difference, having registered a staggering 28 goal attempts. But it wasn't all easy for the Giants. Today, Nigeria had to dig deeper, surviving a second-half equalizer from Tanzania to win a 2-1, thanks to Ademola Lookman's brilliance. And in Rabat, the DRC proved their tactical discipline, grinding out a 1-0 over Benin. Joining me for a deep dive analysis is Mike Hovey, a sports analyst and international broadcaster. Mr. Hovey, welcome to Different Perspectives.
Thanks for having me, Paul.
It's a pleasure to have you, man. It's been a while since you and I last touched base.
Yeah, it definitely has been a minute. It's always good to catch up.
Yes. Okay, so Mike, set the stage for us. We are seeing two different versions of greatness. For example, today, the flair of Senegal, then the grit of Nigeria. Let's get into it, man. You are the, I guess you are the biggest football fan that I know. Break it down.
Yeah, I mean, AFCON opened on Sunday. It's been a couple of days now, and already we're starting to see fireworks, right? So if we're going to take it back to day one, we got to see the hosts, Morocco, who some people argue are the favorites. I beg to differ, but they came out in action, won their opening game. So far, every single team that you're going to call a giant, if you don't call it that, has emerged victorious. Early on, you were talking about Senegal, right? The Lions of Teranga. They also emerged victorious. They're topping their group in Group D. We have DRC. Another surprising factor there. They're second in their group, in the same group. If we look at other big teams, Nigeria just edged a victory over the Taifa Stars. That was a very, very close game. Exciting to see players like Victor Osimhen and Ademola Lookman back in action. If we're going to look at Egypt, that's another team that just edged a victory yesterday, just beating Zimbabwe 2-1. A lot of surprising games, a lot of good games. But the only thing that really has stood out to me is, unlike our previous Africa Cup of Nations, so far it seems as though the attendance is relatively low, but the quality of games is amazing. It's been great so far. I'm only looking forward to seeing what comes out next. There's still a couple other teams to play their first games, among them being, of course, Cameroon, the defending champions. Also, Ivory Coast is still set to play their first games. So there's going to be a lot more surprises coming out of this, and I'm excited to see what comes out.
Interesting. Let's talk about the tactical maturity of Senegal. I watched the game today and I was impressed by how well they played. Under Pepe, they have evolved. We saw them play a high pressing 4-3-3 today. Then Botswana simply couldn't breathe against them.
Of course.
This is the most balanced Senegalese squad that I've seen in a decade.
Oh, that's a very tough one. But I will say, I don't want to say balanced, but I will say that this is among the strongest of contenders when we're talking about the squads that could actually look really good. But I mean, right. Senegal has been a giant on the continent, and it's really hard to use a game like Botswana as their measurement. Not to talk ill of Botswana, but if you're talking about Senegal, they're among the title contending champions. They recently won the AFCON. They're going to the World Cup. They have star players who are playing across the world's biggest leagues. They have big names, Sadio Mane. You talked about Nicholas Jackson.
Mhm.
There's so many other names that are out there when we're looking at Senegal's league. Now, once again, big names doesn't always necessarily translate to quality, right? I want to use example like Bafana Bafana or even Zimbabwe. Those two teams have a predominantly local squad. However, once again, when you're looking in terms of favorites and you're looking in terms of quality, man, the Lions of Teranga are up there among the favorites to win. So I can only imagine ranking them as we go further. Right now, it's really too early to speak in terms of their quality. Once again, Botswana is not one of the strongest teams to use as a measuring stick in terms of success.
How do you keep up with these teams, man? As a football fan, how do you keep up? How do you stay up late hours, like struggling to just to catch up?
No, no. I live, breathe, eat football. This is something that I mean, and I'm not alone, by the way. Football is one of the biggest consumed sports on the continent. AFCON is one of the biggest consumed tournaments internationally, right? Of course, you still got the Euros, you've got all these other tournaments, but once again, if you look at the consumption of the sport of football or soccer, whatever you choose to call it, Africa is among one of its biggest consumer bases.
Mhm.
So yeah, like this is something that we really find exciting, and the beauty of competitions like AFCON is they always tell a beautiful story, right? So if we look at the
Right.
previous one and we look at the defending champions, Ivory Coast, at some point they were ruled out, at some point they fired their coach, and still they were able to come back and win the tournament. If we look at countries like Bafana Bafana that have finally made it to the World Cup, if you look at their previous AFCON run, it was really impressive. If you look at teams, once again, and I keep bringing it up, Zimbabwe hasn't been at AFCON in a very long time. Comoros, who's going to be playing at the World Cup for the first time, last previous AFCON, those teams were among the teams that were really making the headlines. And so it's
Right.
really beautiful to see because not only does it place a spotlight on the talent that is on the continent, but it also allows the international moment to stop and focus on what is happening in Africa, which is, once again, this pool of talent when it comes to football.
Mhm. Speaking of the a pool of talent, I saw when I was watching Nigeria play earlier. I saw they I observed something interesting. I think
Hmm.
defensively they are fragile, right? Uh,
Yes, yes.
how can the Super Eagles, if they want to win, how are they going to do it? Because that equalizer against Tanzania
Hmm.
exposed some real communication issues between
Yeah.
Sami Ajay and Calvin
Hmm.
Bassi,
Hmm. Hmm.
a team that missed out on
On the World
the
Cup.
World Cup
Right.
qualifications to
Um
to play like that was something amazing.
yeah, yeah. It's look, the Super Eagles are definitely among the teams to look at. Not in
Right.
terms of them being favorites to win, because obviously Nigeria has always been a stronghold on the continent. But in terms of the storyline, right? If you look at Nigeria tracking back throughout the whole year, as you mentioned, failed to qualify for the FIFA World Cup.
Hmm.
A lot of teams saw Nigeria as futile ground to go collect points, which was interesting to see a team really revered, a team really feared, a team really respected on the continent be that team that a lot of teams choose to take it at. I'll give you an example. Bafana Bafana beat the Super Eagles. Once again, Zimbabwe, a team that a lot of countries look at as much as they're known as the Warriors. A lot of teams see that feel like they're the stronghold don't really
Hmm.
look at Zimbabwe as a team to compete with. They took Nigeria 1-1 and they drew, right? So the
Right.
Super Eagles, once again, they've had a lot of things happening with them this year. Their captain or former captain literally stepped down and pulled himself out of the squad just before AFCON. You've seen the storyline of what's happening with Victor Osimhen back and forth, even though he is their main guy, their talisman. So there's just a lot of stuff happening with the Super Eagles, but nonetheless, it's up to the boys themselves to prove the world wrong, right? If they go ahead and win AFCON, who's to say? Once again, of course, their biggest dent is the fact that they didn't make it to the FIFA World Cup. But you know what's funny? Look at a team like Ghana. They made it to the FIFA World Cup, didn't make it to AFCON. It's just
Yeah.
how football
Interesting.
works. It's always an interesting story that comes out of these
Right.
tournaments.
Interesting. How about for Group D, the survival strategy?
Hmm.
DRC, for example, beat Benin 1-0.
Hmm.
Despite Benin having dominated the ball at least maybe 65% of the time, every
Hmm.
time I looked, they had the ball. But
Hmm.
it was interesting to see how soaking and striking, looking at the standings, Senegal and DRC are likely to advance,
Yeah,
right?
of course,
But
of course.
with the four best third in place,
Hmm.
how does that work for a team that doesn't perform well at this stage? Do they move forward? What happens?
So obviously, in terms of group standings and who advances to the next stage, it's always the top two teams of the group, and then sometimes, depending on the situation, it's the third best favorite that advances.
Mm,
In this circumstance, obviously, as you mentioned, if we're looking at Group D, we have Senegal, DRC, Benin, and Botswana. Now, Senegal and DRC both won their opening games, but once again, looking at the competition within the group, and I will say this, don't take this word as gospel, because in football, anything, and I mean this, anything
mhm,
can happen. But based on what we're looking at right now, it looks like Senegal and DRC would be the favorites to come out of that group. They are traditionally stronger teams than both Benin and Botswana. However, and I repeat this, anything can happen in football. We've seen way bigger shocking situations. And as I mentioned, AFCON is the one platform where the dark horse always comes up standing tall. So looking at that group, of course, Senegal and DRC are the strongest to emerge and come out, is what I would argue.
Mike, from what you're saying that anything can happen when you're playing these kinds of games. So, where are you
Anything.
basing yourself to say that these are the most likely team to stay on top? Is it
And
from
it's about
looking at
squad
the
strength.
players? Is it
It's about squad strength. It's about the history of the teams. It's about who's played. Like, a lot of these teams are known to be the AFCON strongholds, right? Um, uh, DRC is known to be a revered and respected team across the Central African region and across the whole continent. Senegal is known to be that team. Now, once again, teams like Botswana and Benin, they pop up time and time and time, but they're not really the teams that are loved and revered. But I repeat, and I cannot stress this enough, we've seen the history of these competitions. We've seen giants be taken on. We've seen the story of David and Goliath happen time and time again at AFCON and leave a lot of teams shocked. And I can use once again the Ivory Coast, right? Last year, not the previous AFCON, everybody ruled them out completely, to the point where they had to qualify on the third best rules, right?
mm,
They didn't make it as a first and second place in their group. They did that. And even after qualifying, they went to go fire their coach. And even after firing their coach, they still went all the way toe to toe with the Lions of Teranga and won the trophy. So this is, football is really a beautiful sport in the science that sometimes it's the small team that just plays well and it works in their favor. Sometimes it's the team who just sits back, allows the opposing team to attack, and all it takes is one counter attack to win, and then another team parks the bus, for example, or another team just, all it takes is one small minor error before another team flips it on you. And so I don't want to say that Botswana can't make it to the next round. It's really hard to say. Maybe after their second game, we can now speak on that. If they do win their second game, it's a whole different conversation. But if they lose their second game, then it's automatically like, okay, you're probably in last position. You're probably not going to make it regardless of the scenario. But listen, football, this is one of the reasons why I love it. It's always a moment where when you think you have it is when you actually don't have it. That's the beauty of the sport that we're talking about. So
you,
yeah.
you know, speaking of, has anything surprised you? They've played a couple games now. Has
Mhm.
anything surprised you as we move forward into the next week or
Yeah,
so?
I would say the two games that really stood out to me in terms of surprises, if we're going to call it that, would be Zimbabwe and Egypt, where Egypt literally, it took Mohamed Salah to score in the dying minutes.
Hmm.
Bear in mind, Mohamed Salah and Omar Mamouche, these are revered players in terms of international football. Omar
Right.
Mamouche plays for Pep Guardiola's Manchester City. Mohamed Salah, one of the greatest Egyptian footballers of all time. He plays for
Mhm.
Liverpool, one of the top goal scorers in the English Premier League, right? But if you look at Zimbabwe, once again, a team with a lot of local players, here spots sprinkles of international players, but a lot of them actually play in the local league, took
Mhm.
the Pharaohs all the way to the end. And it took a moment of brilliance, a moment of magic from Mohamed Salah to change that. If we look at today's game, once again, the Super Eagles versus the Taifa Stars, it took literally a last moment of brilliance in the second half by Ademola Lookman for the Taifa
Mhm.
Stars to change their mindset. So all
Mhm.
this these are games that are just a representation of what AFCON is. These are games that really showcase the beauty of the sport in Africa. I truly, there's a lot of competitions in this world when we talk about world football, but AFCON surely is one competition where year in, year out, every tournament, there's a beautiful tale that comes out of that. And it's games like these that represent that.
Interesting. In case you are just joining us, we are streaming live across all social media platforms, and our topic today is Africa Cup of Nations or AFCON 2025. The opening round of the Africa Cup of Nations has lived up to the hype. We want to know what do you think about our, or share your comments and your thoughts with us in the comment section below. Tell us what you think about the Africa Cup of Nations 2025, and share your thoughts and tell us exactly who your players are, what you think, and who you think is going to win this tournament. And of course, today I have a special guest, uh, Mike Hovey, a sports analyst and an international broadcaster. He's breaking it down for us. You can follow him on his social media platforms. You can also learn a lot from him. He's been covering sports for a very long, long time. Mike, let's
Yes,
go
sir.
back to Saleh. You mentioned Saleh. I want to talk about Saleh's context here.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Mohamed Saleh,
Mm-hmm.
like you said, saved Egypt in the, I think it was the 91st minute
The dying moments of the
against Zimbabwe
game.
yesterday, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
From your analytical perspective, do you think Egypt is reliant, heavily reliant on Saleh's magic moments, or is
Um,
there a systematic issue with how they are transitioning the ball from one place to another to or from midfield?
No, I actually wouldn't say Salah is the man. Now, of course, once again, he's the veteran in the team. He's the most revered player on the team. But if you watch the game, you'd notice that players like Omar Marmoush were the ones who were actually carrying the Pharaohs. Salah
Mhm.
was relatively quiet, and I think this accounts for the fact that he's had a very recent bad dip in football. For anybody who watches the English Premier League, and if you're a Liverpool supporter, my condolences. Mohamed Salah hasn't really been playing really well, and I expected that form to continue
Mhm.
in that game. But once again, Salah showed why he's the talisman. Salah showed why he is the player that he is, and even in moments of brilliance and moments of desperation, he's the man who can produce magic, and that's what it was. I think once again, he was relatively quiet throughout the whole game. Moments of brilliance here and there, not what you typically expect from a Salah performance, but that goal, it shows that in moments where you need him, he is the man that could always produce. And so that's very up his alley. That's something that Salah has always done. That's something that Salah has always produced. It's something that's very up his alley as a veteran talisman, as a team leader. So it wasn't shocking. I wouldn't say that the Pharaohs were heavily reliant on him. I think he's a extra. He's a very major contributing factor. But
Mhm.
what I would say is, if you look at who was carrying the team on that day, I would argue it would be Omar Marmoush. He was the
Mhm.
deadly players. He was the one who was pulling players left, right, and center. Each time he held the ball, he dragged two, three players with him. He's definitely a player that's going to be one to watch throughout the whole Afcon.
Interesting. How about the home court advantage?
Hmm.
Morocco beat Comoros by
Yes.
2-0,
Hmm.
but they missed a penalty and
Yes.
looked heavily under pressure from the home crowd in Rabat. Uh, from your perspective, do you think the host nation's tag is currently A boost for them or a burden for the Atlas Lions?
It's going to be a tough one for the Atlas Lions. Why? Because A, they're seen as the favorites to win. B,
Mhm.
they're if you look at the FIFA rankings, they're among the highest ranked African nations. C, they went the furthest for an African nation in the FIFA World Cup, and D, they have a lot of international notable players. Home court advantage definitely does help in any tournament, right? Once again, I hate using Ivory Coast as an example, but look at what it did for them. The 12th man
Mhm.
is what the fans are always called. When you have the 12th man on your side, that is more than enough to change a game. That is more than enough to flip a script of any tournament, any team. And I think in
Mhm.
this circumstance, Morocco definitely are feeling it. If you watch that second goal, oh my God, what a moment of brilliance. What I would argue is likely going to be a contender for goal of the tournament. Beautiful bicycle kick, one to be revered. That is what happens when you are the host nation. That is what happens when you're feeling confident and you feel like you're walking on water. It definitely, Morocco are going to be a team to watch. It's going to be exciting to see what they look like as they approach the quarterfinals, semifinals. When you start weeding out all these,
Uh-huh.
I don't want to call them weak teams, but when the strong men start standing around each other, it's going to be interesting to see where Morocco stands. I think they're really favorites. I think they're going to run the road. Whether or not they'll win the whole tournament is a whole different discussion because there's so many teams that are really looking good right now. And
Mm.
like I said, AFCON really has a reputation of having a dark horse. So I wouldn't rule out any of the middle ranked or smaller nations to go the tall. And you never know, upset. So yeah, that's
Y-
it's they're definitely looking good, but it's exciting.
You know, every time I watch these games, I'm always looking forward to who wins that
Hmm.
golden boot. Uh,
Hmm.
from my perspective right now, I see Jackson. He already
Okay.
has two goals. I see
Hmm.
Saleh has one.
Hmm.
Lukman has one.
Hmm.
Uh, Looking at the shot volume and
Hmm.
maybe service coming from the wings, statistically speaking, uh, who do you think has the best chance of winning the Golden Boot in
Who?
this Morocco edition?
Oh,
I mean,
and
I'm always fascinated by that. I don't know
if we're
what.
talking about Morocco, that's a whole different discussion. I thought you meant the whole AFCON.
So no,
That's
no, that yeah, yeah. I
you
just gave
mean
you.
the whole tournament in Morocco?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Ooh, man, that's a tough one.
Because there are a lot of great
A
players.
lot of exceptional players, a
Yeah,
lot. And what I will say is,
but right now Jackson is on top of everybody. He has
but
two.
he, but
Yeah.
Paul, he played against Botswana, right? That's why I said you need to look at the context of what happened, right, or who they were playing against. There are some
Right.
teams who are going to capitalize and smash teams, absolutely. But once again, you can be in a circumstance where in your group you score 5 goals, but once you get to the quarterfinals, you're not scoring at all, right?
Right.
So someone like, for example, let's look at like a Victor Osimhen who looks really amazing. Still hasn't gotten his first goal, but you know very well that once he gets his first, all it takes is to get that heat off, and he's unstoppable. Those are all candidates. Of course, and that's not to take it away from Nicholas Jackson. I think he definitely is a candidate. Senegal are definitely putting him in sole prime position to do that. And the fact
Mm,
that he was able to capitalize against all these teams that are relatively weaker than Senegal, for me, means that he definitely is trying to get his boots moving. However, once you start getting to the semifinals, quarterfinals, and as soon as you exit the group stages, now it's big boy territory. A lot of players either stunt or shine, and I don't know if Jackson is among the prime candidates to be the player who's going to shine. And that's not to take away from who he is. He's
mm,
doing amazing in the Bundesliga. He's done amazing in previous AFCONs. He as much as he was a questionable forward for Chelsea, he still is a quality forward. Let me not take
r-
that away from him.
right. Right.
It's just a case of there's so many good players that could win the Golden Boot. And even if you think of the
Who's
previous
your
edition of
favorite though?
AFCON, oh my God, that's even a hard question, Paul. There's so many good players at AFCON. There's so many. It's really hard to say. Um, if I had to list a few, South Africa, Lyle Foster, uh, Zimbabwe, Prince Dube, Nigeria, you have Ademola Lookman, you have Victor Osimhen. Of course, Senegal, you've got Sadio Mane, sorry. Egypt, you've got
Come on,
Omar
Mike.
Marmoush.
You're
It's
giving me
so
a list.
hard.
I asked you your favorite. Just one person.
It's really, I honestly that, but this is what I'm saying to you, Paul, is
Right.
the beauty of this tournament is to see all the best, the creme de la creme of African football doing their thing there. There's so many that it's really, really hard for me to look at and say, this is the one player that stands out to me, or this is the one player that I truly love. I watch, and I've watched every single AFCON game. I intend on watching every single game, and every game, it's really, I'm learning some new players, by the way, as we go, where I'm going, oh, wow, okay, this guy's standing out. It's, African football is so, it's very different if you had like a English Premier League, for example, because
Mm,
then you have a longer period to look at these players, right? So this is 6 months to a year of watching these players. And so it's easy for you to relate to one player and go, okay, this guy does it game in, game out. But with
mm,
AFCON, it's condensed. It's 4, 5, 6 games, depending on how far your team can go. And at
mhm,
the same time, it's really, that's where you see it's more about team competition than it is about player competition, right? Because at AFCON, once again, this is why you have these darling Cinderella stories where a team like Comoros starts smacking everybody all of a sudden, where a team, like all these quote unquote small teams, all of a sudden start performing well because once again,
right.
it's 6 games. All it takes is game by game by game by game by game to change your
Mhm,
trajectory. It's really hard to say that there's one player that stands out. There's a lot of players who look amazing. There's a lot
mhm.
of players who are playing well within a system. It's, ooh, that's a really extremely hard question. I'll tell you that.
Now, as an analyst,
Hmm.
what are you looking out for in these games?
I want to say team performance more than anything. So the beauty of, I don't want to say the beauty, but with a lot of international tournaments, players come together once every, I want to say before AFCON, it was arguably once every 3 months, is when coaches had time to brew these teams. And so now you're finally seeing a accumulation of probably, I want to say, a year of all
Hmm.
these players coming. And sometimes a big name like Victor Osimhen might not make the camp because he's busy in Turkey. And so what I'm really impressed by is the team camaraderie that we're seeing, and B, a lot of the local talent more than anything. It's exciting to see the true quality and talent that's coming out of Africa's local leagues. It's very easy for me to look at Mohamed Salah. It's
Hmm.
very easy for me to look at Victor Osimhen. It's very easy to look at all these big names that we're naming, Ashraf Hakimi, because they play on the world stage. But to see that, for me, if, for example, when I watch the Taifa Stars, to see a player that is not known internationally but is the guy in Tanzania taking on Victor Osimhen like he's nothing, for me, is something that I have to take my hat off. It's something that I appreciate and love.
Even me, I respected that the Tanzanian team for sure.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely, right. And that once again, Sunday Shamari will laugh when I say this, but the Taifa Stars are respected, but their players are not on the world stage, right?
that's
You're playing
correct.
against Victor Osimhen, who was CAF Player of the Year just last year, right? Before Ademola Lookman, you're playing
Hmm.
against all these Ademola Lookman himself, right? These are all players who are carrying big teams. Victor Osimhen carries Galatasaray on his back to win a title. Victor Osimhen and Ademola Lookman are playing in the UEFA Champions League against the
Hmm.
biggest of the biggest in the world. And so for me, what I truly, truly appreciate and love to watch is to see the no fear, no nonsense when a player who's playing in Kosafa Cup is taking on Victor Osimhen and making Victor Osimhen have a good day. I love it. I absolutely, absolutely love it because once again, for me, it's painting a true picture of the quality of talent that's in Africa, right? And the reason I say this is because if you look in the grand scheme of international football, right, when a player plays at the World Cup or when a player plays at the Euros or Copa America, these tournaments, they're seen as elite. But when a player
Mm-hmm.
plays an AFCON, only now are teams starting to realize the importance of platforms like AFCON. So
Mm-hmm.
when you have the regular schmegular player who's playing in a third division or first division league in Africa, without having to trial in Europe, without having to play in Europe, showing that he truly can play against the best of the best, that's definitely something to be applauded. It's definitely something that I would want to see more of. It's just I can't help it. It's beautiful. That really for me is my favorite thing about this tournament is to see how there's so many beautiful stories that are coming out of players who we didn't even know who are truly showing that regardless of whether or no you know them or not, they can
Mm-hmm.
stand their own. It's beautiful. It's amazing.
That's a great point. A lot of people don't, when they look at Africa, and I'm sure you've seen this too, they don't make much of us,
Of course.
people from Africa. But
Hmm.
Africa has some of the most talented people. I usually argue that the intellectual balance of power has been shifting in our favor, uh,
Spot on.
especially now with access to technology, with access to the internet,
Hmm.
now even these new AI tools. I think we cannot go wrong. These
Hmm.
young players in Africa have the same access to the information that the players here in the West have. They
Of
can go
course.
online, watch their games.
Hmm.
They just need to measure up to that standard,
Yeah. Yeah.
practice, do their very best to make sure that they stay on top. So
Hmm.
I always argue that for sure having technology in tandem with social media
Hmm.
and all the other things that have been in our favor, you
Hmm.
cannot go wrong as an African. Those people who doubted Africans, they should do it at their own peril,
Hmm.
because Africans are here to stay, and they have demonstrated beyond sports,
Yes.
whether it's
Of
in
course.
academia,
Hmm.
everything that you can talk about, medicine,
Hmm.
Africans are present and they are standing to be counted. You know,
Absolutely. Your point is spot on. Really, if you look at, and obviously I'm speaking because we're talking about sports right now, some of the best players in the world are coming from the continent, right? We
absolutely.
are seen
Yeah.
as the most athletic, we are seen as the most intellectual players. And once again, I can list multiple, a lot of players that are coming that have made and changed world football as we know it. Once
Mhm.
again, I can name Ashraf Hakimi, I can name Mohamed Salah, I can name so many players that are coming from the continent that really are changing world football as we know it. And I'll give you an example, another one, right? I'm a big Manchester United fan. Right now, a lot of us are crying, are crying because our best players have left and gone to AFCON. If you look at Amad Diallo, Brian Bomo,
Yes.
Nus Mazraoui, like we're really are suffering right now because our teams are crippled. But that's not just, we're not the only ones. There's so many teams in the world that are revered on the grand international scale that are
Even
crippled during this
Chelsea.
moment. Even
Yeah.
Chelsea,
Yeah.
right? So a lot of teams really that really is speaking to the quality and talent that is coming out of the continent.
Mhm. Let's talk very briefly about the finances. For these games to succeed, people have to make money.
Yes.
The fans like you have to go in and
Hmm.
patronize some of the merchandise, the bars, the what, you know.
Hmm.
But looking at the stadiums, it doesn't look like these stadiums are crowded. Is it because of pricing? Are the tickets too expensive? What's going on over there?
I want to say multiple things come to play. A Right now it's been really sad watching what in Morocco. Typically, I really enjoyed the previous AFCON that was held in Ivory Coast because at some point they had to change their ticket pricing and everything to accommodate the everyday fan. And at some point, you started to see these stadiums getting fuller and fuller and fuller. The average Smo Joe cannot afford a ticket to these big tournaments. But there's that. But there's also the fact that traveling is really, really expensive across the continent, right?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
if you're going to host a tournament
Great
like
point.
AFCON and I am from Southern Africa, buying a ticket to Morocco is
Mm.
expensive. And then upkeep in Morocco is expensive. I think this is a symptom of issues that are beyond just the football itself. That I
Hmm.
think at some point, and I'm really glad, I will applaud organizations like CAF. I'll applaud Patrice Motsepe for trying to make strides to make sure that these competitions improve as they continue. Um, However, there's so many different ailments and symptoms, as I mentioned, the cost of traveling, the cost of
The
attending these
visas
things,
being
the
denied.
visa, exactly. Like
Yeah.
there's so many situations that make it really difficult for this attendance to happen. Nonetheless, I will still say the supporters still support. You could tell it. Wherever you are and you go in the world, you'll see different fan parks, clubs, and people packing out all these little stadiums just to watch games that are happening at 5, 6, 7 p.m. And sometimes, if you're on the continent or if you're in Australia, it's in the AMs. People are still watching these games, which to me
Yep.
speaks to how much people love the game in Africa. But I think there's so many other things that need to be done before we get to a stage and point where we are starting to see more full stadiums,
Mm.
b are starting to see more investment financially into the sport itself, because there's a lot of loopholes that are happening on the continent that it makes it really difficult.
Mm. How would you respond to people who say that maybe as much as football or the way they call it soccer is a big deal in Africa, there are
Mhm.
people who argue that African governments really haven't built that enabling environment where they tap into their local talent. Let's
Yes.
say they build stadiums, they
Yes.
build sports centers where these
Mhm.
athletes can go and train from. Should it be up to the governments to do that, or is this something that can be privatized just like it is over here?
Um, I think there should be buying power from both forces, right? And even here in America, it's not just government. Government is only, especially if you're looking at soccer as a sport, government is only standing up now because the FIFA World Cup is coming to America.
That's true.
Football itself as an investment or as a sport is something that I would argue recent. And when I say recent, I mean past 10 years is when we started to see true investment in the sport in America, right?
Hmm.
So this is why, for example, you have a Lionel Messi playing in the MLS. It's because it's a sign, right, that, oh, we truly want this to be seen and revered on the world stage. Same thing happens on the continent. Different countries, there's some leagues that really stand out, right? I'll look at the South African PSL, the the creme de la creme of African football plays there. I'll look at the Egyptian PSL, right? You'll see Al Ahly is one of the teams that are truly, truly contenders when it comes to the best teams on the continent. Morocco is the same thing in terms of investment in the sport. However, Africa has what, 54 countries? And so even for AFCON, for example, I want to use that as an example. There's no reason why 54 teams should not be competing at AFCON. It's called the Africa Cup of Nations. The only
That's correct.
unfortunate thing is some countries don't have the same resources as the other
Hmm. They
countries.
can't afford
Right?
to even to
They
compete.
can't afford to do that.
Mm.
And so I think that's definitely something to be stood out for. But once again, it's hard to pin it solely on government. And I think the reason I say that is our governments on the continent have to deal with a lot of things. There's a lot of issues. And so to solely invest in the sport, and that aside, there's a lot of sports to look at, right?
Hmm.
Because if you pour money into soccer, then what happens to the rugby guys? If you're from South Sudan, what happens to the basketball guys? If you're from, it's really hard to say that this is a sport that deserves attention. And even then, if you take it away from the specific sport, it's hard to say that soccer deserves attention because, for example, Afro beats, one of our biggest exports. Then the entertainers say, hey, what about us? I just think you need to help each other in this
Right.
in this situation. Government needs to create a futile ground for investment for private players to want to come in and do this stuff. If you look at the best on the continent, and I'll quote them again: South Africa, Morocco, Egypt, you'll notice that there's a lot of private investment in the sports, right? But government is also pouring in, but private is playing the same. If you look at privately owned clubs like Mamelodi Sundowns, one of the most successful teams on the continent right now, is privately owned by Patrice Motsepe, the president of CAF, right? He pours a lot of money for them to be able to play. They were recently playing at the FIFA World Cup. He's the one who has to pay for their tickets to get here. He's the one who has to do all these different things. Yes, FIFA puts up some kind of money, but he damn sure pulls out a lot of money out of his back pocket. Right. I think a lot of similar things need to happen across the continent.
Interesting. Before I let you go, the World Cup is coming next year to the United States. There are some African favorite countries that have qualified. Do you care to share?
Yeah, man, there's actually a lot. As I mentioned, Comoros, and the reason why I truly love Comoros is I think Comoros, aside from it being the first time, seeing how they played exceptionally well in the previous AFCON and became a team that has stood tall, regardless of them being one of the smallest nations on the continent, for me is something to be applauded. Whether or not they go far in the FIFA World Cup or even at this AFCON, they've earned my respect as a football fan, just to see how they are.
I agree.
This is a team that doesn't have that many resources, by the way, but they're still able to stand tall. For me, they have my respect. I will Bafana, first time at the World Cup since 2010 when they hosted it. Another beautiful story. Of course, Ghana. For me, as I mentioned, an interesting story to see how they couldn't make it to AFCON, but somehow qualified to the FIFA World Cup. And also the fact that Ghana is starting to have a lot of emerging players who are making their statement on the world football, right? So Antoine Semenyo, right now, his name is in the headlines on whether or not he's going to go to Manchester United, Manchester City, Liverpool. He's a shining star. Mohamed Kudus, another one who was shining star, recently moved to Tottenham. So it's really exciting. I think there's several teams, Cameroon among them. There's several teams, Paul. There's a lot of teams. Morocco, of course, that I think for me are to watch. Senegal, another one. In fact, I would argue between Morocco and Senegal, one of them has potential of winning the World Cup.
Yep.
There's no
Morocco has come this close.
Right. Morocco came this close.
Yeah.
I think there's no logical reason why none of an African team can't be the upset. That aside, so I'm really excited. I'm excited to see how this.
That is if they're given visas.
That's funny. Well, we wait to see how that works
out. Okay, yeah, man. This has been fun. Very briefly, do you have, let's say, a tactical X factor for the fans, or maybe the fans should be looking out for the game that is coming up over the weekend, DRC versus Senegal?
Ooh, man,
because that's a big one. People are excited about one.
Now that's going to be a game. Oh man, I honestly don't think I have. For me, I just say just watch the game. That's definitely a game that you need to watch. It's going to be exciting. I think whoever wins that game obviously tops the group, but it's not just about topping the group. It's about making the statement, right? Because you want to be in your strongest foot moving forward. Likely, whoever wins that game is probably, I would argue, going to leave that group unscathed, because I don't see any of them losing to Botswana. So yeah, it's gonna be interesting. I definitely am looking forward to seeing what that looks like. But man, there's so many good games that are coming up, Paul. There's so many. That obviously, like I mentioned, that's a good one to stand out. But if you pulling out teams that are going to be playing their second fixture, for me, I'm also excited to see South Africa play against Egypt. Right, that's another big game.
I know you're biased because you know.
Listen, I can honestly own up to my bias, right? But even then, I can't take away the fact that Egypt looks amazing. I can't take that away. As much
Right.
as the Warriors took them to the T, the fact that they were able to create that moment of brilliance shows to me how dangerous that team is. For me, I always argue that champions are not the teams who go around breezing through teams. No, it's the team who, even on a bad day, can still find a way to win. Now, that team
Right.
is a team you need to look out for. For me, that game is going to be exceptional to see both teams who had to scrape through the last minute to win their game and being the strongest teams in their group, arguably, to see who's going to be standing. I'm looking forward to that game. Bias aside, it's still a game to be watched. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of second games that I'm looking forward to. And once again, before we even go, there's still some first games that still need to be played. Ivory Coast still needs to play their first game. Cameroon still
Right.
needs to play their first game. So I'm excited, man. This tournament is going to keep unpacking, and it's going to be beautiful.
Well, Mike, it's been an absolute pleasure to host you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Paul. I appreciate it.
Yeah, check out Mike Hovey. Mike Hovey is a sports analyst and an international broadcaster. Check out his social media platforms. You can learn a thing or two from him. That's it for tonight. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe to me, Paul Ndiho, on Substack, X, Instagram, Facebook, Threads, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Spotify. We'll see you on another episode of Different Perspectives. For now, so long from Washington. Mike, stick around for 1 second. Let me finish this show.